everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast. I'm Tom Rainey. Great to be with you alongside me for the show, virtually, spiritually, but sadly not physically. But I'm looking at him in a very big window on a flat screen TV in front of me. I feel like I'm watching him in all sorts of high definition. Some people are born for high def. It is MLS legend, US men's national team broadcaster, and a man in his 40s who dresses like someone who's 13. It is Mr. Brian Dunny, champion of Around the Grounds. Dunseth, how are you, mate? You all right?
I would also like to acknowledge me, Rennie. Not only the champion of Around the Grounds, but also the Giorgio mug winner as well. This is my little Chicharito, just because I know you enjoyed his time at West Ham so much.
I never saw that dance.
And he got a red card. Well, he did score a couple times, just not. He does that really good thing. I don't know how I do that. I'm not really a dancer, but
He got the fourth against Huddersfield once in a 4-4 draw. So, you know, that's what we remember him for. I mean, look, we should mention for the people that aren't with us on Grumpy Pundits on Sirius XM FC, we have a season-long game where you predict the scores for every Premier League weekend. Now, Rodney Marsh and I have been playing it for 4 seasons. Rodney has won 3 times. I won 1 time. There is no controversy in my victory, and I refuse to acknowledge there ever was. Brian Dunny Dunseth has taken over on Friday's show alongside me on Grumpy Pundits. You've been here for 1 year. Now, the record points tally was me last year getting 280. That was our best ever year for Around the Grounds points. I got 287 this year, and I came third. Rodney Bloody Marsh got 290. You got 317 points, 3 points for the exact right score, 1 point for the right result. And you predicted Leeds to win every game for like 15 weeks, and they got relegated. Sorry, Tim. So how did you win this?
Also, remember Nottingham Forest, my loyalty, my friendship with Dane Murphy. I was choosing Leeds United and Nottingham Forest every single weekend, and you guys were just laughing at me. It became kind of this joke where every single weekend I predicted them to win, and you guys were making fun of me because of the Lululemon stretch pants of the now departed Jesse Marsh, as well as Steve Cooper's incoming 38 players that could never win a game. And I didn't even realize until the end of the season that we were also doing the final table bonus structure. And that really hosed me. I thought I was done. Got super nervous. And even when Marcos was texting me yesterday hey, come on the show. We're going to get you guys all together. We're going to unveil. I was like, I won, right? Did I win? I think I had a strong 20-point lead. He wouldn't give me anything. Give me anything. I got nervous. I had the opportunity to get the double. He's a good producer. He's a good man, top class. And yeah, man, I destroyed you guys.
Makes a nice change. The world wants us to move on. Now, I've got loads of things on today's show I do want to get Dunny's view on and give mine on as well. I do want to do a final word on the teams that have gone down. Leeds and Leicester joining Southampton in the Championship in England next year. So I do want to talk a bit about that. I want to get Dunny's view on whether it was wise to sack Jesse Marsh, considering nothing that came after was in any way an improvement. So maybe Jesse got a bit hard done by. I want to talk a bit about that. We'll try and maybe touch on Borussia Dortmund ballsing up in Germany again. That just depressed everybody. But as we came into the studio here to record the program, we got some really interesting news that I think now they're just giving out the job of head coach of US men's national team to anyone who's just standing outside a Dunkin' Donuts waiting for service. So we just got the news that Anthony Hudson is leaving the position as interim boss. He replaced Greg Berhalter, who I think just like pissed off the Rainers at dinner once and so got sacked. I think that was the story. I forget the whole thing. Now someone called BJ Callaghan, who sounds like a writer on MASH, as opposed to someone who should be a football manager. BJ Callaghan, who wrote episode 7, season 4 of MASH. Dunny, you got to tell me who this is. I do not know. He's been named as the USA head coach for the CONCACAF Nations League and Gold Cup tournaments following the departure of Hudson. What's happening?
Yeah, by the way, I saw Greg Berhalter. He was at City Park. He was in St. Louis at the weekend because his son, Sebastian Berhalter, who was he had a fantastic performance as defensive midfielder for the Vancouver Whitecaps. He was inside the stadium. So he was in St. Louis. I saw him there. Didn't get to talk to him. I kind of left him alone. He was with his family and speaking with some people. But so Anthony Hudson, he was formerly I think he was head coach in New Zealand for a while. He was the head coach of the Colorado Rapids, had a terrible time. It was just a complete disaster, and ended up being the US under 20 head coach and moved to Chicago. And then when the coaching carousel of assistant coaches, when you're talking about Jason Christ took the job at Inter Miami as Phil Neville's assistant, Josh Wolf left to take the head coaching job at Austin FC, and Luchi Gonzalez left to take the head coaching role at San Jose Earthquakes. The original contract, I believe the timeline for Anthony Hudson to stick around and not depart along with Greg Berhalter and his staff was because their contracts had ended at the end of the World Cup. And the under-20 World Cup, which is currently happening right now, Anthony Hudson was tabbed to be that coach. So that was his cycle. Mikey Veras comes in the moment that Anthony Hudson is pulled up to be Greg Berhalter's assistant. Mikey Veras is the head coach of the under-20s. And Anthony Hudson, by pure opportunity of sticking around because his contract was still legal and valid with U.S. Soccer, ends up taking over. He's in charge of the 2 January games against Serbia and Colombia, then against the games that was the Nations League's qualifiers to get them into the upcoming semifinals against Mexico in Las Vegas in about a week and a half time. And then the game against Mexico down in Phoenix. Now, Anthony Hudson, he did a fine job. I think the only way to fail in that job is to get blown out. But that complement of players were highly European based, and the game against Mexico was mainly MLS based with a couple European players that weren't playing significant minutes. And he did fine. He didn't embarrass himself. He didn't embarrass the team. The team didn't embarrass him. I think everything felt like when Matt Crocker came over from Southampton, was named kind of the director of U.S. soccer going forward, that he could take his time and figure out who he wanted to hire. Still think the process is taking too long. I still think that laundry list, that short list, should have been immediate. I know there's conversations, and I know this is more of a 3 to 4 year opportunity. This is kind of the idea of a legacy manager. I had to put my pen down, quote unquote, a legacy manager, because this will be the manager that you are going to have in place for the World Cup in the United States. Still taking too long for me, but whatever, I digress. So Anthony Hudson, I don't have Twitter. Right before we're coming to the show, this is where Tim Horsey, sorry, Tim, I just had to say it, piss you off. Yep, I'm getting the middle finger right now. He lets me know Anthony Hudson's out. I sent a couple text messages, and we'll see what happens. I said immediately, oh, he must have a job. Must have a job.
Must do.
We were told his contract is valid through August, I believe, publicly. He was going to be the head coach, the interim head coach of both the Nations League semifinals and hopefully finals, and then through the Gold Cup. But it kind of gets in that stage where do you want to get caught holding the bag? And now you would assume, because he's done a good job, nothing spectacular, nothing terrible, he's done a good job, that people are looking at him and saying, okay, head coach material. Now, does he want to be an international manager? Does he want to be a full-time boots on the grass club manager? That's the conversation, the narrative that we always have. Listen, at the end of the day, he's out. We move in. Question for you. Who's BJ Callaghan? BJ Callaghan is a coach that I remember my first, not introduction, but awareness of him was with Jim Curtin in the Philadelphia Union Academy. When Jim Curtin got the head coaching job at Philadelphia Union, he brought him up as an assistant. He did a great job. I think he's one of those trusted, loyal advisors. Philadelphia Union with Pat Noonan, Chris Albright, Ernst Tanner, they were doing a great job over kind of that 5-year period. Continued to do so, but the departures of Albright and Noonan to FC Cincinnati, and then BJ Callaghan left, and he was a part of the U.S. soccer kind of system with the U.S. men, and kind of trickling into whatever role he could potentially have with the youth teams as well. He's now in charge. I can tell you by being around him, and again, I don't know him personally, I'm just watching his work. He was boots on the ground in terms of training and running through training sessions with both the European-based players as well as the MLS players. When they were preparing for El Salvador in the Nations League, I saw him hands-on, moving players around, possession, here's the press, here's how we move. So he's very tactic-oriented. And then when I saw him with the MLS team in Phoenix, same thing. He was moving the players around. He was doing, I'm not saying he was the one in charge behind Anthony Hudson, but it was very evident he had a big role with what he's doing. So I think there's a lot of respect. He was part of the World Cup group, so everyone is going to be acutely aware of him. How he met this will be the same issue that I think Anthony Hudson would have had with these group of players. And it's ultimately, Tom, when and this is, I think when we saw like bringing Gio Reyna back in and giving him the number 10 role, like they were easy moves, make everybody happy after the controversy of the fallout with Berhalter and Reyna's. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? What happened at the World Cup? Anthony Hudson stuck him right in that number 10 role, gave him the playmaking responsibility, let him play. Everything was great. Kumbaya. Everybody likes each other. But the moment that you're not playing well, and this happened in the first half against El Salvador, when he goes in the locker room, who does he dig out? Who does he have a go at? Does he feel like he can have a go at these guys? If these guys are looking at Anthony Hudson and or looking at BJ Callaghan and saying, you can't talk to me like that. Like, you're just an assistant, bro. All of these things, you have to have a level of trust. You have to have a level of accountability. And most important, you have to have a level of respect with these guys that when you make tough decisions or you're hooking them out before halftime or after halftime because they're not performing to the level in which you expect them to, or you have to make a tactical adjustment to go win a game or close a game out. What does the body language look like? Does that player respect you enough to give you the respect and the handshake and the look in the eye to understand what you're trying to do is best for the team? So long story short, 6 minutes later, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
6 minutes
of
analysis leads to I don't know. Do you know whether the role of BJ Callaghan is still getting played by William Shatner? Do we know that?
It could be.
Has he got Heather Locklear as assistant? Do we know that? Is she still around Locklear? I don't know. What about April Clough playing Officer Vicky Taylor? Is she still around? I don't know.
Chance, yeah.
Richard Hurd, who looked exactly like Carl Malden, who's also in Seinfeld. He was Captain Dennis something or other. Is he still in it? Is this TJ Hooker thing? Is it doing all right? It's
such
okay.
a great show back in the day. Yeah,
landing a little bit.
That and chips.
Soft landing. I knew you were going to bring chips up. I sensed the chips reference. Essentially, the very best of luck to the US men's national team in these games coming up. You're now in the Ryan Mason bit of the Conte.
He's the longest serving. He's the longest serving member of the US men's national team technical staff as of right now.
Terrific. Hey, that's what you want. The person who's been there longest gets the job. Those are the rules. When we get more information, we, of course, will bring it to you. And Dunny's going to be all over these games, covering these US men's national team games in the near future. One man we think should probably be in charge is Jesse Marsch, right? I mean, what's he up to now? Is he going to work? I don't know. That leads me, Dunny, to a couple of questions about Leeds United, who we knew were going to go down, really. Like, statistically, going into the final day of the Premier League season, they were always going to go. So my question isn't about that, really. My question is, I was looking at this going into the weekend. Jesse Marsch had a PPG, points per game total at Leeds, of over a point.
Yeah.
Over a point per game keeps you in the league. He was in charge for 37 games, 11 victories. And I heard an expert on Leeds United. I won't mention them because everyone is entitled to their opinion. I am not a Leeds fan. And so, I don't want to dig them out personally. But I heard a Leeds expert say the biggest issue is that we didn't sack Jesse Marsch soon enough. And I'm kind of listening to it, and I get the point he's trying to make, that when it's over, right? I get that. And there's a Brendan Rodgers comparison we might try and make later in the program too, when it comes to like, when it's over, it's over. In another era, maybe Brendan Rodgers would have resigned in the summer with all that was going on, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I'm looking at it thinking, Javi Gracia came in. He got a 1 PPG as well, by the way, just below Jesse Marsch's, but there's 7 defeats in his 12 games in charge. Big Sam came in and got 1 point. And 3 defeats, including a walloping by Tottenham at the weekend, where apparently in training, no one said, should we mark Harry Kane? Should we give that just a whirl? Now, I know football changes a lot, but I'm sure even Big Sam at this point, in between chugging down a pint of wine and eating a Frey Bentos pie straight from the freezer, might have said, yeah, Mark England's best striker, probably. Give it a whirl. So my question really is, did our boy Jesse get done dirty here by Leeds United? And if he had stayed, would they have been more likely to today, as we record the program, be a Premier League team?
I think no matter where I fall on this, if I say anything positive, I'm going to be in the, pro-Americana. I'm only saying this to back Jesse.
No, we won't give you that criticism here because we've given you that grief a lot, and I think it's been super fun. But I'd love to know to know your genuine opinion here.
As I look back, and I said it at the time, it's an obvious panic move, right? It's a panic move. Now, this is where I'll baseline this. None of us were inside of that locker room. None of us were on that training pitch. So whatever was happening between the players and Jesse Marsh and his staff, and or Jesse Marsh and his staff with the players, because it goes both ways. There comes that moment, and I don't care who it is. We can talk about Antonio Conte. We can talk about Brendan Rodgers. We can talk about Steven Gerrard. There's moments in time where, let's use Gerrard really quick with Tyrone Mings. Well, he dug him out, right? Dropped him.
Yeah.
So how did the player, quote unquote, revolt start? If you're talking about one of the most popular players in the team, this is all right. Theoretical.
He took the captain's armband off Tyrone Mings.
Exactly, and dropped him. Yeah. So how is the reaction from friends? How is the reaction from respectful players? How is the reaction from the group then that turns on him? And I'm not saying this happened, but I'm saying these are things that potentially happen. The only thing that I heard, just from me hearing stuff, and which is nothing, right? It's all whispers, rumors, secondhand, triple hand, whatever, all that stuff, was the micromanaging was a lot. The micromanaging of movement, slowing things down. Okay, this is what I want. It's teaching moments. It's also Red Bull pressing way and all of those things, but everything was very robotic, right? Those were the only whispers I heard, that there was a lack of freedom. And when he left, Patrick Bamford, this is the only reason when I kind of heard that stuff, I was like, well, whatever, man. That's just sour grapes or whatever. It's all BS. But then when Bamford had his post-game presser on the immediate game afterwards, that to me suggested that Bamford wasn't happy with what was happening. It kind of like peeled back the curtain just enough that led me to believe that some of the players weren't happy with the way that Jesse was, his intensity, his hands on what he wanted, which whatever. At the end of the day, that's what managers have to do. Whether you have the players' respect, you don't have the players' respect, they're getting in. They want certain things from you.
His previous manager was Marcelo Bielsa as well, we've got to say.
Exactly.
It's not like he was like, go do what you want, guys.
Yeah, the most micromanaging, like body fitness, body fat, weighing each, like all those things. So it's all over the place. I just think after a January transfer window, when you spend what, 40 million-ish when it's all said and done to bring in a couple of players that you think are going to strengthen your squad, are going to make your squad better, you got to give them more than a game. You got to give them more than one game, right? I just, whatever. Ownership, Victor Orta, everything going into Jesse and then to the players. The panic button was smashed. It wasn't pressed. It was smashed. And now we get, and we've been saying this for weeks. Now we are going to look back and say, who completely blew it? Well, Leeds United isn't the only one. Leicester City's in that same boat. But yes, to your original question, I felt it was too early. But at the end of the day, they must have had a really damn good reason to sack Jesse Marsh at that stage of the season, to literally throw everything up in the air and be like, ooh, I hope we can get out of this mess. And they failed miserably.
What's really interesting about this for me, and I want to get onto Leicester as well, because I genuinely am, if I go back to my pre-season predictions and the way their seasons have gone over the last few years, I'm shocked they're in the Championship. So I do want to talk about that. But the Leeds story, I think, is fascinating, because this will be, we spoke to Thomas Frank on Grumpy Pundits on Sirius XM FC on Tuesday. And, speaking to him, and an incredible job he's done, second lowest budget in the Premier League this year, lowest budget in his first year. You speak to someone like that and you can see the incredible faith they have in this guy. And even during kind of bad times, bad losses, bad defeats, there is a faith in what is being done. And I think you can extrapolate that to David Moyes at West Ham and Steve Cooper as well, who basically took a kind of almost straw poll of the crowd. He almost spoke to the fans, either directly, indirectly, whatever, and said, what would happen if I sack Steve Cooper now? And they'd be like, it will be fucking crazy for you to do that. Sorry, Tim. And he was like, okay, well, I'll give him a new contract then. And they're up. They've stayed up. And, the David Moyes thing is long discussed on this program. At Leeds United, I never quite bought our plan was always to bring in Jesse Marsh to replace Marcelo Bielsa. We've had to fast forward this a little bit because Bielsa, blah, 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 bollocks, right? He was the guy that was available right now. And maybe you had planned it, but plans in 6 months ain't plans for right now, right? So, I don't quite buy the whole, it was our long-term successor plan. It may have been at that point, but your long-term successor plan in 6 months. I mean, look what's just happened to the USA, the men's team. They've had to get William Shatner as boss, and they didn't plan for that. So Jesse Marsh coming in, gets them up, blah, blah, blah. This season, I think there's a real lesson here how do you do it? What do you do if you come up? You're Luton, you're Sheffield United, you are Burnley. Things aren't going well. If you sack early and you have a significant improvement, Gerrard to Emery, get it done. Get it done, get your effing guy, as Danny would say, and it makes a lot of sense. If you're not going to go and get your guy, do nothing. Do nothing, say nothing, change nothing, and let that coach, let that manager do their job. No one said when a manager comes in, everything is going to go well all the time. And there will, quite rightly and understandably, be fans. We are fans who say, he's got to go. I've had enough of this. He is useless. We're losing, blah, blah, blah. Your job isn't just to listen to that. Your job is to assess what you can do. They couldn't attract better to Leeds United than Jesse Marsch. Javi Gracia has basically been on the football scrap heap since he got the sack at Watford a couple of years ago after he took him to the FA Cup final. You know, he has achieved nothing in the game from that point. Valencia was a nightmare. He was out in Saudi Arabia, I think, at Al Sadd or something like that. When you've gone to Saudi Arabia, you've basically admitted, I need cash. And that's fine. But you don't then bring him back to do whatever he had to do there, and to then hire Sam Allardyce. You know, I have a lot of respect for Sam Allardyce because not that I think he's a particularly great guy. I just feel like he's not bullshitting you, sorry, Tim, in kind of a lying to you way. He's incredibly arrogant and incredibly cocky, and I don't think he's right, but I don't think he's lying to me. And when you bring him in, he does this job and he kind of does what he's going to do, and he turned up for the money. He'll say afterwards, I got £500,000 out of that. Me and Sheila went on cruise for 4 weeks after that. Lovely it was. Thank you very much, the guys at Leeds. That's what it'll be like. And God bless him for it. He'll be back on the No Tippy Tappy podcast probably in 2 weeks' time with double the numbers. So, you know, there's all of that. But I think now we've got the final analysis. Danny, I think it was a huge error. It may have been an error to hire him, but once you've hired him and he's on 1 point per game average, no matter how bad it has been, it could not have gone worse. It could not have gone worse. You know why? Because they came 19th and were relegated. So next time around, maybe if Leeds get up and they get to February and they think they're in trouble, they might be like, you know what? Let's see what you can do. We hired you to keep us up, and there's 20 games to go. And our previous experience tells us bringing in just randos doesn't work.
Yeah. And by the way, is the shine now off Big Sam after West Brom and now Leeds United?
Not according to him, I think.
Oh, I know. But I mean, the reality is the guy who saved you is now back-to-back really. So listen, we said this. We have been talking about this, and now we get the opportunity to reference it. Patrick Vieira walking away from Crystal Palace. Roy Hodgson coming in. Absolutely correct decision. We were wondering with Lopetegui. Wolves, I don't know. Wobbles, big wobbles. Now they have the money. Was the promissory conversation really true? Well, we'll find out, but he kept them up. David Moyes. We've been talking about David Moyes getting sacked all the way back to the World Cup. And there was March, we thought it was really, really close. And then he got a positive result. Right decision to stick with him. Bournemouth. That goes all the way back to the beginning of the season, but at the end of the day, correct decision. Nottingham Forest, Steve Cooper. Who would have replaced him with that group? Having to learn an entire squad, much less the spine of a squad. Made the right decision, even though they fired everybody else around Steve Cooper before giving Steve Cooper the kiss of death publicly on multiple occasions that he's the manager. Oh, Deutsche, always the right decision. But then Brendan Rodgers, they gave Brendan Rodgers all the possible time he could have ever wanted. And then I wondered just what the squad finally, if that to me was less of a panic, more of this can't get any worse.
Yeah.
We have to try. And I don't care if it is Dean Smith, we have to try. But then
which was the wrong decision, right? It's the wrong decision now.
Unless the squad turned on him. Unless the player revolt privately becomes so strong to the board and the ownership that they say, like, no, we're all against him. No, we're not going to play for him. We won't even walk out on the training field if he's there. Like, that's, and I'm not suggesting that happened with Brendan Rodgers.
It can't have been, right? It just can't have been. It's so strong.
That's the only way, because why wouldn't you give him the rest of the year? I mean, it's like, as much as I make fun of Brendan Rodgers, it's still Brendan Rodgers. He's still a good. You don't become a coach. Sorry, Tim. Overnight. I felt like I got to get one in. You become a terrible coach overnight. He's a good coach. I think the squad was terrible in terms of their performances. Didn't match what the names on the back of the jerseys should have been. But I'm so sad for for Leicester City fans. Like this last 6-year cycle has been nothing short of extraordinary.
Yeah.
Like it is out of all the teams, I think that one for me, watching how many fans over the last 6 years if you weren't a football fan, fell in love with the idea of Leicester City. The little guys punching above their weight, smacking the big boys in the face, winning the title, qualifying for Champions League. And literally for about 5 seasons, all we kept saying was finally we have a small, quote unquote, a smaller spending club that is competing with the top 6.
Yeah.
And then it's gone. Poof. Just like that. Well, they're not, but like,
yeah, I got you. Yeah. I mean, the Leicester thing, I got a couple of questions for you on Leicester, because the two things that really interest me about this are, number one, the Brendan Rodgers angle. And we're in a world now in football where no one ever resigns. No one will ever resign again from a major European league. They won't do it because of the money. And that is obvious and evident. I go back to the amount of rows I got in with Manchester United fans when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was evidently no longer the right man to be Manchester United manager. And in another era, I just kept making the point, if it wasn't for the huge financial implications of resignation, you could hear in the way he spoke, pre-game, post-game. He knew the jig was up. He knew it was finished and he had to go. And he was waiting for someone else to say that word. You know, it's like when you get booed off stage at the Comedy Store. Who would do that, eh? And then you're waiting for someone just to put up, to take the mic off you and say, this is going real bad. Please leave by the back exit before this group of Millwall fans beat you to death. That's personal experience, folks. They probably would have done. So Solskjaer is kind of a canary down the coal mine on that one for me. And then I always think, oh, resign. I can't even tell you the last time someone resigned. In the summer just gone, there was huge financial issues at Leicester City. We know about the issues that the King Power business have had with duty-free in Thailand, all that sort of stuff, plus the son took over from the father. There are financial issues there, contracts here, contracts there, things not going as well, the pandemic, all of that, right? And the story is that Brendan Rodgers said last summer, I'm going on holiday, sell him, and sign me him and him. And he came back from vacation and nothing had happened because they could not spend the Fofana money. They could not spend the Schmeichel wages, and they're in all sorts of trouble.
They got Vestergaard.
Well, they had to get Yannick Vestergaard because of the financial issues we're talking about. Brendan Rodgers apparently hated him as a person and player. So he had no time for this guy at all and took it out on him desperately.
Every day.
But that's the point, Danny, where I feel like in another business, another era, someone of wealth who doesn't need the job, and football managers are that, they might have said, you know what? The writing I can clearly see is on the wall here. I'm a manager who's done this and delivered this over certain years. You're now telling me the scenario isn't that. I'm telling you this group of players are going to struggle and I can't coach them to success. But then he stayed. And I think he stayed, again, to your point from earlier on, I'm not guaranteeing this. I think he stayed because he thought, I'll get sacked soon. And if I get sacked, I get my X amount of million, and they'll get someone else in. Everyone's happy. And I don't blame Brendan Rodgers for that at all, by the way. If you get a contract where you get paid up a few million to walk away, you stay on until you get paid, get fired. He stayed on too long. But once you stayed on as long as he did, he should have stayed till the end, in my opinion. But it goes back to the start. Done in another era, would he have resigned there? And maybe another little canary here, we might start bringing into managerial contracts the 1st of July break clause, or the summertime resignation clause, or something like that. These contracts seem to be like, they always favor the manager and the player. Well, surely the club's got to protect themselves a little bit in these long-term contracts they're signing.
Well, this comes down to the validity of the contract. And I find it hilarious when people are like, he's got to leave. Well, or when a player says like, no, I want to leave. And then, so clubs do this thing, this whole morality, we're in this gray kind of morality zone when we talk about the validity of contracts. because we do this thing where we say, oh, how could Harry Kane want to leave Tottenham Hotspur? He's got 2 years left on his contract. What a terrible human being. What's Daniel Levy going to do?
Why are you saying that so saucy? Why is that a sexy story for you?
This is amazing.
Is this dirty talk for you? Are we getting an insight into your life now?
Can you imagine? Is he a good person? He signed a contract. It's got 2 years left on it.
Very intense.
Why would he ever want to leave Tottenham Hotspur?
I really want this to move on as quickly as possible for everybody.
Club.
We can only apologize, everyone.
Harry Kane, massive man. But then on the flip side,
that's Danny's sexy voice. In case you're listening with the wife.
So on the flip side, now we're talking about Harry Maguire. Harry Maguire's got what, a year and a half left on his deal, 2 years left on his deal. He's got to leave the club. Do what's right. Leave the club. Do what's best for your career. It's up to the agents. I'm just of the belief that when you sign a valid contract for millions and millions and millions of dollars, well, then you have to see out that contract. You should see out that contract, unless it gets to the point where through negotiation with your agents and the club that you can find something that both parties fits perfectly. That there's that one side or the other. So to your point, now with the whole agency thing and having to get FIFA approved licensing to be an agent, and now the whole agent thing is going to be a whole different conversation going forward, because the agent's fees are now percentages as opposed to just flat out payment rates, and what this is going to look like. It's really going to change the conversation surrounding which direction agents are capable of going to, and manipulating their client to sign with certain clubs because they're going to, whatever, that's a whole different conversation. But I do think there will be new tweaks, and it'll have to start at the highest and the biggest managers and the biggest players, to where there's going to be some type of option clause available. And the option is going to be beneficial to the players and not just the club, to the manager and not just the club. I mean, how many times have we Man United over the last couple of years? How many times did we hear that Ander Herrera's contract's up at the end of the season, but they have the option to hit the option clause for one
protection
more season.
Clause,
yeah, and so how many times did Phil Jones get a new deal for no reason? But he's a good dude. He still gave the heart for the badge every single time he stepped on the field. I do agree with you, though. There will come a point where, in a situation like Brendan Rodgers potentially found himself returning to Leicester City at the end of the transfer window, he could say, nope, promises weren't met. This is what we wanted. I am exercising my right to leave this contract right now.
But also pay me, which is the element that
But at the same time,
probably need to be worked out there.
Like, think about it, though. Like, and again, theoretical. If Brendan Rodgers gets through the January transfer window and nothing's changed for Leicester City, and he knows he's in big trouble, this is Brendan Rodgers. Like, he's probably going to end up being the Tottenham manager when it's all said and done anyways.
Yeah.
But, like, if he would have walked, it's not as if he's not going to get a huge contract. It's not as if he's not going to be on 8 to 10 million for his next deal anyways.
Yeah.
So, like, I get that you want your gardening leave and you want your money, and like, you deserve to get paid out if you are fired because there's the validity of the contract. But at the same time, like, I kind of feel like there's certain managers in the hierarchy of managers that know they're going to get paid out. And Brendan Rodgers is never going to be poor. Brendan Rodgers is always going to make millions upon millions for wherever direction he chooses to go. If he comes to MLS, he's going to get a couple million to coach an MLS team, right? So, like, at the same time, like, egotistically, isn't there that moment where you say, like, kind of the money? Sorry, Tim, I had to get in. It's like 4 minutes. And like, I know I'm going to get a great job. And by the way, I could be prepared for that next job by scouting all of the teams that I think could be a good fit for me, because there is that potential that I could take Tottenham over at the start of June 31st or July 1st and be totally prepared and already be in negotiation, as opposed to egotistically watching my record sink lower and lower and lower, and things get worse and worse and worse. And then it's up for public debate if I'm the right guy or not.
I mean, it goes to my ongoing point that I'm always making on these shows, which is we should start moving on from managers on multiple year contracts. Players, absolutely. I understand that because of protection and the transfer market and amortization and all that sort of stuff. But managers, 1 year, renew them every single year. That would just be a sensible, logical way to go about it, as opposed to, you can't change the players during the season. And because you can't change the players during the season, it becomes very difficult to move them on, which a lot of clubs are going to find soon. The managers, evidently, they couldn't give a shiny toss about getting rid of them at any point during the campaign. And so maybe we create a scenario where they actually can move on. It is worth noting, too, it does seem like Leicester and Leeds players, Jack Harrison seems to be one of them, they do have relegation release clauses in their contract, but also along with that, which again is a little bit of toing and froing conversation here, we'll give you a relegation release clause, but we also give you a 50% pay cut if we go down. Very smart, very sensible.
Yeah.
And I hope for the sake of a lot of these players that are going down there in the clubs that that is all arranged in advance. Actually, briefly, Danny, on this, let me ask you this question, because I think it's really interesting. I was watching Match of the Day on the Saturday or Sunday night, and they highlighted the fact that, where's the list here? At Leicester, Charlie Soyuncu, Daniel Amati, Johnny Evans, Nempalas Mendy, Ryan Bertrand, Tete, Yuri Tielemans, and Ayose Perez on loan at Betis at the moment, but contracted to Leicester. All their contracts ran out this summer, so they're all running out like now in a few days or whatever it is, next month. James Maddison has one more year on his contract after that. And they made the point that it wasn't healthy to have that many players running out or running down their contract at the same time.
Yep.
I thought that was really interesting. So from my perspective, I can understand it from a protecting the club, financial interest, long-term planning. You know, you kind of work with a group of 5 to 8 players on the kind of cycle so they grow together. But from a player perspective, is that a question then of their dedication and their performance?
100%.
Because they're going in 3 weeks.
Well, we talked about this coming out of COVID, wasn't it? Burnley, I think Burnley had 4 or 5 players that refused to tack on the extra 2 months to finish the season because
wasn't
the validity.
Weghorst one of them? I think
it was Weghorst. Ryan Fraser might have been another one, if
yes,
I'm not
that feels
mistaken.
right, yeah.
Because why would you risk it? Why if and I said this before. What players want is they want security with their future. I'll speak as a former player. The reason why I came back to MLS in 2005 was because I had a 4-year deal. It was an agreement with the coach that I was going to be here for 4 years. I'm going to give up this European adventure. I had a couple moves on the table that potentially could have put me in a fantastic situation. And I chose, both on and off the field, I chose to come back, play for Real Salt Lake. At the end of the season, I was traded for 2 players. And to this day, I don't have a great the same relationship that I had with the manager beforehand, because the manager was an assistant coach in the youth teams, the U.S. men's national team setup. And there was this promise that I was going to be able to settle down. I was in the, not the final stages of my career, but what felt like the final phase of my career where I wanted to put roots down. I ended up putting roots down anyways and staying in Salt Lake, but I was out after a year. Broken back, ripped left shoulder, broke my 5th metatarsal twice, felt like I did enough. And then they ended up moving me. And I was pissed. I was super pissed. I was super angry that I've been lied to. These players, nobody wants it. When you're talking about Premier League players, there's not a Premier League player alive that says, I'm excited going in the last year of my deal, unless they already have that move set up. If they have, if you're Weston McKennie, if you're going in the final year of your contract, you are playing for another big contract. But at the same time, if you're happy where you're at, you want a multi-year deal. You want to know bare minimum you've got 2 years. Beneficial to the club, beneficial to yourself, because at least with that final year, going in that final year, the club could potentially capitalize on you still bring in a boatload of money, even at half price, even at a quarter of the price that they paid for you, that then you're still valuable and you can still get that move. And it's going to be cheaper. As opposed to trying to buy out your 3-4 year deal. I think it's bad planning. Of course it's bad planning. You need to be in a phase where you're offset, and I can understand 3 or 4 guys, but you're talking about some really important pieces and loyalty to these players. I just think it couldn't have gone worse for Leicester City. Yeah. And I think as we'll continue to unpack it by reading, and the Canaries are already starting to sing all over the place, it's going to be eye-opening how bad things were behind the scenes for some of these clubs. And they'll probably end up on The Athletic, and we'll probably be talking about it here in the near future. Like, oh my God, can you believe they did this back in March?
Yeah. I mean, look, the Leeds story and the Leicester story are going to be really interesting. I think Leicester, I think the issue is at Everton. I think Leeds, it seems like ranking competence. We shall see. But commiserations to both sets of supporters, certainly the Leicester City ones who would not have expected to have been in this situation. And this is, I always think of a kind of personal experience with these sorts of things. My team have been relegated twice. We're not like Everton. We don't hang around like a cockroach forever. When we deserve to go, we go. And I'm sure it'll happen again in my lifetime as well. But there's that bit where, and it genuinely is a bit of a gut wrencher, and this will happen to a lesser extent with Declan Rice for me this summer because he's played 200 games, and hopefully there's a trophy, and what else can you really achieve at West Ham, right? So I get that, I can logically understand all that, but there's a point where, when West Ham went down in 2003, Sam Allardyce's Bolton got 43 points. I think West Ham got 42. Only team in the last 20 years to go down on 40 plus points. And that summer, they lost Joe Cole. They lost Joe Cole for like £6 million when he was 20. Yep. We lost Jermaine Defoe the year afterwards. We lost Michael Carrick the year afterwards. We lost Glenn Johnson. Di Canio left and went to bloody Charlton. Freddie Canuti left. David James left. It just... And some of them you think, they were good players, but whatever, David James, who cares? But Joe Cole leaving. We spoke to Joe Cole, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago on Sirius XMFC. And even now speaking to him, I'm like, oh.
He fanboyed.
It's just such a... He came back later in his career and all that sort of stuff. But, Mourinho had made him a bloody defensive left wing back when he could have been like Gascoigne for us, So it is gut-wrenching. So I always have so much empathy for supporters of these clubs who... I know the Leicester fans have achieved things and seen things that none of us are ever going to kind of get. But they're going to lose Harvey Barnes, James Maddison. You're going to lose the best years of James Maddison's career. And if he gets with the right coach, the right club, I think he could be probably England's best player going into the next World Cup if he goes to the right place right now. So gutted for him, really am. Really briefly, you mentioned Weston McKennie. Did you see the stat about McKennie this week? Did you see this one?
That he started each and every game for all three managers?
No, not that one.
Oh.
This more negative one.
Oh.
So Leeds United as a club were founded in 1919. The calendar year now is 2023. Since foundation, 458 outfield players have played more than 20 games for Leeds United. 458. Weston McKennie is in that group, and he has the worst win percentage or highest defeat percentage of any player to have played over 20 games for Leeds United. He is now in the history books as statistically the worst player ever to play for Leeds United.
Yeah.
13 of his 20 games were losses. Now, I say that, A, because I know it annoys you, but B, what is going to happen now to Weston McKennie, who basically came to the Premier League and all he did was take throw-ins?
Yeah, listen, I know you love winding me up on this one. I think the haters out there are trying to find every possible statistic to bury him right now. And I think a lot has to do not with just the losses and Leeds United being relegated, but also I think a lot has to do with the momentum behind one of his buddies stating publicly and that getting put out that he was going to leave at the end of the season. Listen, it was a curious decision for us as American fans, but we understood, right? Playing with Tyler Adams, playing with Brendan Aronson, playing for Jesse Marsch. When you go from Juventus to go to Leeds United at the time in which they were trying to figure out who they still were. Weston McKennie, it's not his fault they went down. There's a lot of reasons Leeds United went down. If you can say that maybe he wasn't as impressive as people wanted him to be when he was there, but I don't think he was anywhere near as bad as people tried to make him out. He's being labeled as this villain. He's going to be framed as this villain. He's going to be framed as this guy who didn't care, was just taking the money, showing up, helicoptering in, helicoptering out, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The conversation that I had with him and the short conversation of that down in Orlando, he really was enjoying his time. He was enjoying the fans, the amount of fans that were coming up to him. And he wanted this to be a success, whether a long-term solution for him at the club or not. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but he was genuinely, the way he was talking to our group down in Orlando I felt like he was really enjoying the experience of being at Leeds United and being a part of what they were trying to achieve. Again, I think he's a much better player than people are. I think right now people are just on him because it's easy. Sorry, Tim. I saw the video of him on the train. I saw what they were trying to do. I saw the dog in his lap. I saw the dad's tweet, all that stuff. At the end of the day, I still think he's going to have a fantastic career when it's all said and done. But he is going to unfortunately wear most of the anger of Leeds United and the frustration of that fan base because he's been framed as a simple target for everything that's gone wrong.
I mean, firstly, if you are a parent of a player in the US men's national team, shut the up. Sorry, Tim. Just stop talking. Stop talking publicly about your son's career. Just there's been some bad examples recently for everybody. What if BJ is listening? You don't want that. Look, I think he is a better player than I kind of say in front of you because I think it's very funny to watch your face. But I do think he hasn't been great. I got to say, I think he's played really poorly, and I do really think that when we move forward with not just Weston McKennie's career, but talking about transfers and January transfers and all that, you know, I said to you all the time, recruitment is the single most important thing in football. But the other part of that for a player's career, from a player's perspective, is picking the right club at the right time. And when we get to next January and there might be some last day loans, Weston McKennie will be an example of don't do that. Like that was the wrong club, the wrong time. Everything was wrong. It went wrong afterwards. You can't foresee these things. You never know.
Yeah.
You know, you think of Jesse Lingard's loan to West Ham or think of Weston McKennie's loan to Leeds. One of them inexplicably worked out amazingly well, though Jesse Lingard then decided to torpedo his own career for the next 2 years. Apparently, he's been at Nottingham Forest this year. Not a clue. No one even knows. No one's even seen him. I'll check the gram later to see if he's still going. But then, you know, the McKennie thing can happen. So it's just all about maybe it's luck, maybe it's research, maybe it's better advice from your agent, maybe it's not listening to your dad. I really don't know. But I think that's been a huge Charlie Foxtrot of a transfer. Nearly out of time, but I do want to cover a couple more things, Danny. Everton stayed up. I mean, for Christ's sake, right?
Deutsche.
I mean, just hideous football. The atmosphere there is diabolical. There's
nipple
biting Solanke, just horrible. Thank God.
Nipple pinching.
Yerry Mina is a great example of everything that's gone wrong at Everton because he's always injured. He's gone on way too much money. He's not particularly good. He comes in, gives it like the big I am, then disappears for 3 or 4 months. All of that. I'm glad he's gone. For Everton fans, I'm glad that he's leaving. There's some investment coming in from MSP Sports Capital. They're going to be buying into or the club. I'm not sure how much as yet. I read Kieran Maguire's piece on it, and he's not 100% sure exactly.
Blitzer. Yeah, David Blitzer.
How it's going to go.
Yeah, what's going to happen with Crystal Palace. Yeah.
But the issue here, there's all, well, exactly right. There's all sorts of complications to this potential takeover. But whatever happens, Danny, because of, and this goes to the Newcastle conversation, the Public Investment Fund, and, oh, look, we've got a sponsor. Who are they? The Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Okay, great. There's a reason why this sort of thing happens is because they find a way to funnel the money and make it seem like, you know, you've got your commercial revenue has got to match your wage growth. That's broadly and simplistically what kind of FFP is supposed to be. And that's where the questions come with Manchester City. They're trying to tell us that they're more commercially successful across the last few years than Man United or Real Madrid. I mean, it's a little hard to buy that. But Everton are so stopped by the Mashiri overspend. And again, we talk about transfer fees here. Transfer fees are irrelevant, really, when it comes to this conversation. It is all about wages, contracts, and what they've signed up to. And they have signed up to such gargantuan wages on long-term contracts on top of those transfer fees, which are secondary, but still relatively important. They still can't spend. They'll have another summer here, Everton, even with a takeover, because of the rules. They can't pump the private money in, which is an issue with FFP. I understand that. I agreed to a point with what Martin Samuel at the Times is always wibbling on about. Not all of it, but some of it. It's about protecting the cartel and stopping new money investing to do a kind of Jack Walker thing. But of course, there is never going to be another Blackburn Rovers Jack Walker because Jack Walker is now the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, but whatever. But Everton, Danny, another summer. They can't spend. I hear Sean Dyche is quite unpopular with the board, who themselves are quite unpopular. No new board would keep Sean Dyche in charge because his football is so crap. It's corners in the beep test. No one wants to watch it. There's no money coming in. I mean, same again next year, right? Deitch got in January 17th on the final day.
Yeah, the new stadium and the funds that will be generated off of that will be a positive step in the right direction. New ownership, I am always cautionary of any conversation because we just don't know what the plan is. We don't know what the spend could potentially look like, and what kind of budget are you potentially talking about? And for whatever the board looks like, I always think about power, the power play of people trying to hold on to their pants and who can still be involved as opposed to who's going to be pushed out. So are you going to be kind of a Man United spending club going forward? Are you going to be a Crystal Palace type of club going forward? Are you going to be a Leicester City type of club going forward? The reality is they have to be really smart with their recruitment. They've got to stop focusing on taking the fringe players from any of the top 6 teams and putting them on crazy wages just to buy them off and buy them into the club. And they have to have a plan. It doesn't seem like they've had the plan, or at least the plan that is the right plan going forward. So they survived to fight another day, but they've got to figure this out behind the scenes. And I hope Sean Dyche gets his opportunity to play whatever style of football that he envisions could be the most proactive and entertaining type, as opposed to holding on for dear life on the final day.
And speaking of the final day, one final topic to bring up today, and I want to get to the Bundesliga. And again, I'm not an expert on the Bundesliga, but I do know Dortmund it.
Oh,
sorry,
boy.
Tim. Now, Bayern champions again at home. Borussia Dortmund just needed victory over Mainz, and they would be Bundesliga champions. Instead, it's an 11th title in a row for Bayern Munich, because our old mate Sebastian Haller missing a penalty, could have been 1-0 on a nice cruise. From that point, they find themselves 2-0 down. They get back to 2-2. Bayern are 1-1 against Cologne. Then late goal for Bayern. They are champions. They win it on goal difference. The lowest points tally, I think, of all the decade of titles they've got. I mean, look, whatever way you slice this here, there's so many positives about German football, Danny. We haven't got the time to get into it all now. But if a team is winning it 11 years in a row and they can be so crap compared to their usual standards, and they are so unhappy right now, they sacked Oli Kahn immediately after the game against Cologne the weekend, Oliver Kahn, who was in charge of getting rid of Nagelsmann and bringing in Timmy Tickles for some reason or other. Salihamidzic went immediately afterwards as well, getting rid of all the people that have made decisions at Bayern this season, and they can still win the league. Germany right now, for all of its many positives, has got a lot of massive, massive problems. The fans don't want a sovereign wealth takeover. I'm all on board. They've got to find a way to rein Bayern in, because even this Bayern can be champions. It's so depressing. It's bleak. It's irritating.
Yeah, and I wonder how much the whispers about Hassan and Ali Khan finding out the night before that they were going to be sacked led to the outburst, which was why we didn't see Ali Khan on the field, and what the future holds, because they were very grim up in the stands throughout that performance. I was actually with Lutz Pfannenstiel, who was on co-coms for that game, the St. Louis City sporting director, general manager, whatever. The H Club has their own. But we were talking about that game. And the one thing that we both were kind of just chatting about was Dortmund was wide open defensively. And it's always been their Achilles heel, is their defending and their transition defending. But they were going for it so hard that they let themselves wide open. And in that second half, they should have scored at least 6 goals. I mean, it could have been 8 goals. But then again, Mainz could have scored 3 goals as well. I mean, that was just, you talk about game management. And Gio, I thought Gio off the bench was fantastic. I thought he had a huge impact on that game. But, the beauty, the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows, you jinxed Sebastian Haller. I'm just saying it.
I know, I did. I'm so
claimed
sorry.
Him. You claimed him.
I claimed
him
back.
Dortmund fans, at Thomas J. Rennie, it's his fault. If you just, want to vent your frustrations, he claimed Sebastian Haller after killing him for the last 2 seasons. But yeah, listen, it just goes to show. It goes to show how difficult it is, even in a year in which Bayern Munich were terrible. And by the way, these rumors, Dieter Hamann, it's saying that Timmy Tickles is about to walk out on Bayern Munich already. If that's true, my God, what is happening behind the scenes? Can Nagelsmann come back? Can you imagine now a new board, now a new CEO and leader?
Yeah.
Can you imagine a world in which Julian Nagelsmann is the manager once again at Bayern Munich to start the season?
If your options are that or Tottenham, I think I'd go back, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course you go back.
That's all he's got left now.
Yeah, as soon as he dug the knife out of his back from Ali Khan and Son, I think you're saying there's a chance.
I mean, look, the only thing I'll mention on this, I love Swiss Ramble on Twitter. I highly recommend everyone follow Swiss Ramble to follow the business of football. And if you want to know what's wrong in Germany, again, it is not because of a sovereign wealth fund. It's because they've basically somehow indoctrinated a population to believe that playing for Bayern Munich is equivalent to playing for the German national team, amongst being just a better business model and commercially more successful. Fine. But the Bundesliga highest wage bill is Bayern Munich, 373 million euro. The second is Borussia Dortmund on 216 million euro. So essentially 158 million euro per year they can spend on player wages. It's the highest discrepancy of anyone in Europe from first to second, apart from Paris Saint-Germain, because it's first to quite literally everyone else. But it's even bigger, the gap in percentage terms, Bayern to Dortmund, than Man City, who are a country, to Arsenal, who are a private hedge fund from America.
I mean, think about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, think about Ousmane Dembele, think about Christian Pulisic, now think about what it's going to look like with Jude Bellingham. I mean, from a business perspective, Borussia Dortmund is run incredibly well. They have an idea, they have an identification process. I wanted Jude Bellingham at Manchester United, and we've seen he decided to go there because there is a tangible idea and execution. It's not a theoretical option. It is a tangible execution of what they're trying to do. So it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize that money and in the investment. And what we've seen is they go out and they find 4 or 5 players with high level opportunities and potential. So what does this look like for Terzic and company going forward?
And it's such a shame in many ways that Bayern, their winner was caught by Musiala. No way he's going anywhere. Bellingham, player of the year in Germany, couldn't start the weekend because he wasn't fully fit. Already gone. Real shame. Right, that's this week's Week in the Tackle. We're going to do a question time episode for next week because we're both going to be on holiday. There will be another full Week in the Tackle to follow, I think. Or we're going to do something after I've been to Prague. We'll see if we win. And then we'll do some further question time shows for you moving forward. But for now, I've been Tom Rennie. That is Brian Danny Dunseth. Tim Horsey produced the program. And we'll see you next time.